record here in a little bit. So, okay. It says recording. Let's stop the recording. Cancel. Okay. I guess we're going to be recording. So, okay. There we go. Oh. Well, hello and welcome to Thrive Today's webinar called Why Thrive. My name is Nick Harang, and I'm so glad that you're able to join us today for this webinar. We have a great hour planned for this time today, and I am really blessed to have the founders of Thrive Today with us, Chris and Jen Coursey. Chris and Jen, you want to unmute and say hello?
Hello, my friends. Thank you for being here with us. We are glad you are here and excited for our time together today.
Yes, we are. We're glad you're with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Chris and Jen, and thanks for inviting some of your close friends to join us for this call as well. We've got some great people that Chris and Jen have gotten to know through the years and who've been impacted by Thrive Training. And so we'll be hearing from them in this hour. But these are folks that have experienced the 5-day Thrive Training. It's a relational skill training that Chris and Jen have helped develop and have been running this ministry that's been changing lives for, I think, over 15 years now. Is that right, Chris?
Yes, it is. It's actually been over 17 years
over 17
now.
years. Okay. So this has been something that has touched countless lives. People have traveled from all over the world to experience this. And so we're glad to have just a few of these people with us on the call today who've seen Thrive impact their lives, their marriages and families, and their ministries. Now, I know that some of you on the webinar today might be new to Thrive. You may have heard about it. You're here because you're curious about it perhaps, but you may not know exactly what it is and what it's all about. And so, Chris and Jen, if you take a few moments and share with us this morning, would you tell us a little bit about what is exactly Thrive Training? And then how did you guys become involved in it? And then why do you guys continue to do this? Why is it such an important part and a big focus of your lives and ministry?
Well, thank you, Nick. Yes, we are very excited to share about Thrive because really Thrive has changed our lives. And Thrive honestly started out as an experiment. I once read a book called Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You before it was even in print. I read this book. It was in a little folder, and I read this book and I said, wow, you mean God designed us for joy? And when I read about how God designed us for joy, and I read about all of these fascinating topics like belonging and maturity and joy and joyful relationships and God's presence being with us, and I just said, you know what, this is fascinating. This just explains my life. And little did I know that one day I would be a part of working with Jim Wilder, who's one of the authors of this wonderful book, to basically do an experiment to see if we could take all this great information and put it into practice with some hands-on training. So along the way, early in this whole process, I met this wonderful woman called Jen, and little did I know we would be running this training together. So Jen, I'll let you say a few words about your Thrive story.
Yes. So for me, I was introduced to Thrive and these skills, the first training. And at the time that I was introduced to them, I realized I had none of these skills. And it showed in my life. At that time, I was on federal disability. If I got out of bed, it was a good morning. I just had struggled with anxiety and depression most of my life, and realized that the reason for a lot of these gaps in my life was because I had none of these relational skills. I had no ability to quiet myself, no ability to recover when things went wrong, when I had negative emotions. It just explained a lot. And it also gave me a direction to go, because now I knew what to pursue, what the missing holes were, and what I could start doing about them. And so I was very excited to be introduced to this. It was a couple years later that Chris and I, a few years later actually, I guess, that Chris and I got married, and I'm so grateful that, excuse me, that I had that foundation, those skills before we got married, because it just made such a difference. now that's my personal Thrive story of how it's impacted me, but I've also loved and delighted in being a part of continuing to develop it and just seeing it grow and spreading it to others. Because as Chris's mentor Jim Wilder said, you know, if something has changed your life, that's what you should teach and train. So we're just excited to be able to share this with others because it has changed our lives.
And Nick, really Thrive, you know, part of being the experiment was all this great brain science came out in the 90s. And it was very clear from the research that a parent, if they had some of these relational skills, they could download and pass on these relational skills to their children. And it sounds odd today, but back then, no one had really kind of raised the question is, as an adult, if I have the skill of returning to joy from my anger, can I pass that on? Can I help someone else, another adult learn this, or another child learn this skill? Can we learn these skills later in life? And so part of the experiment was really putting that to the test. And so when Jim and I had this idea for Thrive, I was actually pastoring. I was a pastoral counselor. So I was working with people who had some pretty rough lives, and they would say that they were far from thriving. And so I spent about a year working with Jim, just trying to practice these exercises and these skills within the community framework that I was a part of. And the results were astounding. And I would see people smile for the first time after doing some of these exercises. Some of them started to learn how to rest and quiet for the first time. And some of them could work for the first time in a very long time. So they could really start to get on their feet, we might say, relationally and emotionally. And the most exciting thing was people started to encounter the living God and God's relational. So as they were growing and practicing all these different exercises, they really started to realize that Jesus is really glad to be with them. And so it was fun to watch this transformation. So really Thrive is a way that we're learning and practicing what we've later identified as the 19 relational skills that make relationships work. And Nick, back in the day, you know, we were trying to just pack everything into like a 6-day event at the time. And just, we had all this great science, we're going to put it into practice. And we learned a lot that week. And one of the big realizations we discovered was you have to learn skills for growth before you can really effectively learn some of the harder skills for recovery. And then you have to learn these skills of recovery before you can master solutions for pain. You just need these foundations in place. So we now run 4 training tracks, but back then we had 1. And we tried to do everything in 1 track. And if you've ever tried to drink from a fire hose, that was pretty much what the experience was like. So we've learned a lot along the way of just practicing and trying this. And little did we know that one day we would be doing this full time as a ministry. Because back then I was pastoring full time. Just Thrive was something I did once a year when that time came. So here we are. As you said, you know, people from all over the globe come to a Thrive training because they really want to learn and master these skills so they can take them back home to their families and their communities. And the skills are really something that we need to practice. And so I can talk about the skills, you can read about the skills. Ultimately, we have to taste them, we have to practice them, and we have to practice them with other people so that I not only learn the skill, but then I can effectively spread the skill in my community. And so 19 skills might sound a little overwhelming to some people, but really when you look at it from building a foundation, it all comes together rather well. So we are excited to be here talking about this.
Yeah, well, and I can say from firsthand experience that I had heard about the skills. I'd seen some webinars about the skills, and then I had the opportunity to taste and experience the skills. 2 years ago, I attended True Identity, and it was kind of my easy on-ramp to just go by myself and see what this was all about. And it really was a transformative experience, getting to be around you guys and not only the teaching, but the practicing of these relational skills. And then last year, my wife and I were able to attend track 1 together, which was just a wonderful experience for us as bonded partners, which I'm sure you'll talk a little bit more about. But I don't want to take the time to share our story right now, other than to say that it was just such a blessing for our marriage and continue to help us grow in maturity and relational health, which is impacting our lives, our marriage, and our kids, and our ministry. But actually, I want to hear from a few of the folks we've invited to be on the panel with us today. So I want to welcome first Charles Spoelstra and have Charles share a little bit about his experience. So good morning, Charles. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning, Nick. Good morning, everyone. First, I guess I'll just tell you a little about me. And I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, originally from New Jersey, but I'm a counselor here. And I have a wife, Dawn, and 2 wonderful boys, Leif and Owen. And I really began this journey because of my children more than anything. As a parent and, a parent of young kids, I had a lot of anxiety in my parenting. And when I started to read the different books and learn about maturity, I saw what was missing for me. And it was very unsatisfying. My parenting style was not what I wanted it to be. I started it for that reason, but what happened was I didn't know, but I was going to fall in love with my wife and my kids in a whole new way because of joy. So that's pretty amazing for me. I was full of dysfunctional habits. I related to everybody in left mode, if that makes any sense. Like I was always thinking critically and problem solving, and I didn't know how to shift to feeling what people were feeling, to attuning with them. I knew theoretically what that was, but I didn't know how to do it. I wanted practice. So, that kind of sent me to Thrive. That's what got me started. And I can honestly say that, I practiced before, we started doing all the training beforehand. My wife and I went to track 1 in Austin. And the experience was just deeply satisfying and really rewarding for me. I found the exercises that Chris and Jen and Jim and the other people created, they're so playful and they're so thoughtful at the same time. Like every time I sat down to do one at the training, I was like, this is amazing. I would say it pushed me emotionally. It was challenging, and I saw the people around me being challenged. But at the same time, this was much later in the game. It wasn't a fire hose. It was I've never been to something so carefully synchronized and carefully paying attention to my needs emotionally and mentally. There were breaks just when we needed them. Everything was timed just right. That was wonderful. Just wonderful. And, I've done all 3 tracks of Thrive. And I called Chris after and said, I just want to come back as a volunteer because I love it so much. I just want to be there. The community is so joyful, And when I think back on the moments that I experienced, I can still remember the moment Jim Martini sat down in track 2 with me, and he made that eye contact with my wife and I felt drawn into a relationship. And it was like my brain went, that's what it is. Oh my gosh. I'd felt that with my wife, but I never had a person I didn't know sit down and connect with me like that. It was amazing. I can still remember that year when Jim Yeager, who was another track 2-3 trainer, sat down and he mirrored back the shame story that I had told, which was a hard story, but he showed it on his face and I felt so known. Like my whole body shifted and I was like, that's it. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was wanting to know how to do. And when I saw him do it, it changed everything for me. So the dancing, of course, is probably my favorite part because it's just really fun. I'm a high energy person. I love to move and feel the whole group around me, synchronizing with them. It's just, has been fantastic. So the results of it in my family too have been phenomenal. I can give an example from this morning. It's not that we don't still have struggles and fights and things, but we know how to return to joy, all of us, and we take the path every time. This morning I was in a hard place, prepping and to come in and, do this. And my little son, Owen, who actually has a cold, came and crawled up in my lap and looked right into my eyes and shared joy with me. It was like he could sense that I needed that connection. And he's coming and doing it now. My older son, who really struggles with kind of a little more of a negative thinking, he initiated appreciation the other day while we were driving in the car. And I was like, are you really doing this? And I was like, this is happening. They were so resistant at first, but it's become an integral part of our family. And so now our home feels more like a safe place, a haven than a battleground, which has just been amazing. So I'm so grateful for this program. And, since it's changed my life now, I want to share it. I want to do it with people. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Charles, thank you so much for sharing those things. Man, I just heard so many key words, that, and just the impact on not only your life and just you kind of getting some things that you sensed were missing, but you didn't know how to do. And you learned some life and relational skills that have not only changed you, but it's spilling over to your kids and your marriage, and I'm sure your ministry as well. So that's really encouraging, Charles. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So glad to hear that. And we have a few other folks that we want to hear from as well. And one is Pastor Dana Bryan. So I want to say hello, Pastor Dana. Welcome.
Hi, Nick. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how Thrive has impacted your life?
Well, I pastor Center City Chapel, which is a church here in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And I originally learned about this as I began to research how I might help some of the alcoholics and drug addicts and people that we were ministering to at the time. And then folks from the suburbs driving in to be a part of our church realized some of them were addicted to porn. So I began to just research how to help. And I realized that what I was doing and what I was saying to them really wasn't helping. And so I did the prep. My wife and I went several years ago. And by the end of the first day and the beginning of the second day, I realized that while I was coming to Thrive, to find ways to help other people, the one that needed the help the most was me. And that I was striving in ministry, trying to prove myself. I was trying to work hard and be perfect for everybody, have all the answers, all those kind of things. And when I got there, I've been to many, many conferences, way too many conferences in my pastoral life. Mm-hmm. And I've never been to one that I felt refreshed and that built joy this way. And I couldn't wait to come back. And so we went through all three tracks, my wife and I did. And it by track 3, everything coalesced for me in making sense.
Wow.
And I am grateful to the Lord that Chris and Jen followed the Lord in doing this and leading this, because the Lord has used it to transform me. My prayer life with the Lord, my time with the Lord has been revolutionized as a result of that. But I am from a Bible church tradition, which basically means if there's something in the Bible that I've seen before, if I haven't seen it in the Bible before, I shouldn't be talking about it. I never realized all the things that are in the scriptures that I'd never seen before. And Thrive helped open my eyes to that by going through that and training this and realizing the part that my body played in this and how important that was for me. I just talked about the spiritual things, and not paying attention to how your body is playing into this. And so when we came back, I wanted to announce a revolution in our church, but I realized that I really my wife and I just needed to practice this before people. Before long, people in our church began to say, there's something different about your marriage.
Wow.
And what is it? What's going on with you? And so we've moved from that to people asking, to us leading classes. And right now my wife leads online groups for women. And from Washington, D.C. to Belize to California to here in Charlotte, where she is they're practicing these skills and talking about them. And I am teaching a series, or have been teaching, on maturity and using these skills as the basis for things that we need to train for that help us grow, and going through the scriptures, using them to do that. This morning I had an elders meeting, and one of my elders, who has so much more education than I do, theological education in other ways, he says, I just want all you guys to know that I am the biggest fan of what Dana is doing right now, because it's answering all kinds of questions for me that I've had all my life. And it's helping me make connections that I've never made before. So it's transformed us, and it's having a profound effect on our church and our ministry as a result of it.
Wow. Well, that is such an encouraging story, Pastor Dana. I love how the Lord led you guys to, rather than come home and tell everybody, everything's different, we're doing all this stuff now, and just wait and see. The Lord led you to just let people experience that change that you guys experienced. And as a result, people started asking you, what's different? What's changed? So that there's proof in that pudding right there that this is actually a life-changing, transformative experience.
Well, as I was thinking about it, I went to Chris during one of the conferences, and one of the weeks, and I said, I'm thinking that I need to be doing this. And Krista said, absolutely. So I followed your advice, Chris, and as I have many times since, on all kinds of ways, and it's been so helpful.
Well, that's great. And another thing you said, and I can bear witness to, I like attending conferences. I was a pastor for 17 years, and I've been to all sorts of conferences. And like you pointed out, Dana, this is not a conference. Really, it's an interactive, relational environment that fosters transformation. There is some teaching, but not much. A lot of that's front loaded before you ever get there. So you get to actually practice the skills in community with the people you came with, or in my case, my first year, came by myself, and I got to build community with some people. And it was that interactive relational environment with the exercises that got us to practice these skills. That's where the transformation began to take hold. And I've never experienced a conference like it. So thank you so much, Pastor Dana.
My pleasure.
Well, Chris and Jen, I'm sure you guys are encouraged. This is why you guys do what you do, is so that stories like this come out of every training, from people from your local city to people who've traveled literally from across the globe to attend a Thrive training. So Chris and Jen, I imagine at this point, some people are probably thinking like, wow, that sounds great, but man, 5 days, that's a long time, and 19 skills, that's a lot of skills. And some people might be looking at that and just a little overwhelmed. Why don't you tell a little bit about what these relational skills are, and why we have a 5-day approach rather than just a 1 or a 2-day approach?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And just hearing these great testimonies really just is awesome. And I'm so grateful for our friends being here. And Nick, that's exactly what happens. People here back in the day, it was 6 days. We got it down to 5 days by taking out all the teaching. We've got Dr. Jim Wilder just doing all the teaching now on video with some online courses. So you get that good information before you arrive and start practicing all the fun. But yeah, people quickly do the math. So you've got a 5-day training, which requires traveling to get there, to get home. And you've got the expense of a hotel and the flights or the gas and the training. And you know what? It is an investment because it's training. So this isn't where you come to an event and we give you a bunch of great information and we overwhelm you and you retain about 15% of that information. No, this is a place where you learn skills, you practice. My friend Jim Martini likes to call it a joy boot camp, because you're there and you're learning. And I've got a lot of people on the front end of the training say, this is a lot of money, not sure I can pull it off. And I tell them, we've been doing this going on 20 years, and I've had a lot of people complain about the cost before they get there, but I've never had a single complaint after. And that says something.
Wow,
You
that
know,
really does.
in almost 20 years of running these events, when people actually do the training, I don't hear those complaints. And I think it's because they've realized there's something here. And I can think of one leader in particular. He came to me and said, Chris, I'm not so worried about the cost of the training, but I'm worried about the time away from work. I don't know if I can do it. I said, hey, you pray about it, and but here's why it's worth it. And we talked about that. And at the end of the week, he came up to me and he said, I didn't know what I was getting into, but after being here for 5 days, not only was it worth the time off, I would have paid $10,000 for this week.
Wow.
And that blew me away, that he felt that way. But there is something about, when people come and they learn these skills, this is the kind of stuff that stays with you, and it helps us with what matters most to us, and that's our people, our relationships, our friends, our families, and our communities. And but it helps. I think it helps people to have a reference point that this is training. And I'm a pastor, so I could talk for a very long time. But when people come to Thrive, I really want them to learn those skills. And Jen, if you'd like to share anything on that, or on the 19 skills, or
because in truth, we do have intro events. We have 1-day events. We have 2-day events, and those are great events also. There's a place for those. Often people walk away from them saying, this is such a great taste. Now I want more. And that's where Thrive is. Thrive is the more. It's the in-depth. It gives you enough space and time to actually start to have an impact on changing patterns, to start to have an impact on building habits. It's a start. It's a little bit like a mountaintop experience where you then have to go down and live it out. But the longer the mountaintop experience, the more used to it you are, the more likely you are to continue carrying it out in your everyday life. It's also why we have a year-long follow-up, what we call skill guide, that we follow up to Thrive with, that we have people go through exercises once a week so that they can continue to implement it in their home life and in their family. And the interesting thing is 5 days feels like a long time. And if I were to think of going to a 5-day conference with a bunch of information and content, that would feel very overwhelming. The interesting thing is by day 4, every year, I've had the privilege of leading track 1 often, and every year, everybody, when we say, well, it's Thursday, they say, oh no, we only have 1 day left. We have to go back home tomorrow to real life. This is just such a joyful, peaceful environment where we have this protected space for our relationships, for our skill building, for habit building. It's kind of like a little bubble that makes it an ideal environment for learning these skills.
Yeah, and then you have the joy of bringing it home.
Yes.
And as our friends have shared today, practicing this with those that matter the most to us. And as a pastor, I'm excited about all of this because it's really, I've always wanted that intimacy with Jesus, and I just didn't quite know how to have that and what that looked like. And so not only are these skills that we learn and use in our relationships with our family and our community and our coworkers and so forth, but these are also skills that we learn to use in our interactions and our relationship with Emmanuel. And it is profoundly impactful. And I heard a board member just shared this morning during a time of prayer how we had someone who attended just one track of Thrive, and he was doing a funeral, and he had a chance to help a non-believer walk them through a little Emmanuel exercise where they were able to interact with Jesus. And this person accepted Jesus as her Savior and spent the rest of the day sharing this profound impact with this group of people who were made up of Christians and non-Christians. And just because he learned some skills from one time at Thrive, that he was able to lead this in front of a group, a non-believer, through the Emmanuel practice, and it had a profound impact. So when I think about the training, that's the stuff that really floats my boat when I hear those kinds of stories. how our friends are using these skills in their lives and their relationship with Christ. That is
Yeah.
the icing on the cake.
Yeah, let me just add one more thing. My thought, one of the things I love about the 5-day format is, I know I called it a bubble, but what I mean is it's a protected environment where we can get a head start, a jump start on really implementing this so that we then have traction. It's like getting traction to bring it into our lives.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I want to make sure that everybody watching today or by recording later knows that we have 2 opportunities for this 5-day Thrive training in 2019. One is coming up right around the corner. I'm actually going to share my screen because we have a couple slides that might be easier for some folks just to see it. Let's see if I can, here we go. But we have an upcoming training in Tampa, Florida, February 17th to 22. So that's just coming up in a month. And I don't know about you, but I'm in a rainy part of the country. I'm in Northern California, and it's cold and wet and rainy. So Tampa sounds really good right about now. And then in July, right in your new hometown, Chris and Jen, we're going to have our 5-day Thrive training, July 21st to the 26th. So these are the 2 chances in 2019 for folks to be a part. And Chris and Jen, why don't you share with us a little bit about what you're looking forward to? I'm gonna show up the next slide that actually lists the different tracks. There's a true identity track and then track 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna leave this slide up, and Chris and Jen, why don't you go ahead and share share a little bit about what you're looking forward to and maybe help people understand which track would be right for them.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Well, you know, while we have 4 tracks, tracks 1, 2, and 3 are tracks where you want to bring a bonded partner and you do some preparation so that when you get to Thrive, you hit the ground running. And the True Identity track is our newest track where there's no preparation. You do not need a partner. You simply show up and enjoy the fun and participate in the training. So True Identity and Track 1 are on-ramps. This is where you would start if you're brand new to the training. And in a sense, True Identity covers a lot of the skills, but it's a very gentle slope because you work in groups of 3. And so when you're working in a small group, the exercises and the training, it's more manageable. It's less intense than when you're working with a bonded partner. So some friends might come with a friend and do True Identity. They might come on their own. We've even had some couples whose marriage is just kind of in a rough spot, and they say, I don't think I can do the whole week with my spouse, but I think the True Identity is something that we could handle. And so we get a lot of people coming to True Identity just because it is a gentle slope. It's the newest track, and you're covering a lot of ground with the 19 skills. Track 1 is where you do the online course, enjoy Jim Wilder on the video, apply some of the theory and the skills to your life. There's a couple books to read. Then you come to track 1 with your friend, with your spouse, with your prayer partner, with someone, and you'll do a lot of exercises with your partner. But the nice thing about Thrive is it's very interactive. So there's some times in the day where the whole group, all the tracks are together. And then there's times where you're just working within your training track. And so there's a lot of, it just we really mix it up, and it's very engaging, and it keeps you going with some joy, but then we also take times to rest. So the flow alternates between high energy exercises and low energy exercises because God built us for joy and for rest. And so Thrive is really trying to work in that rhythm, so to speak, with high energy and low energy. Yeah.
Well, that's encouraging. I think I can't remember if it was Pastor Dana or Charles that mentioned the schedule. I think it was Charles who mentioned the schedule. He used the word synchronized.
Yeah.
But I've been to a lot of conferences, and this was truly the best layout of the possible use of time with those, like you said, those interactive times in the larger group, and sometimes with your bonded partner or your triads. Down times, the meal times were wonderful, incredible fellowship, great food. But just, yeah, it was a joyful, restful, impactful week for me when I went by myself to True Identity, and then a year later when my wife and I came. And my wife just raved about the people that she met from all over, and raved about just the week that we had together. So thanks for setting it up in a way that maximizes joy and rest. It doesn't overwhelm us, doesn't overload us to where we come home from this mini vacation needing a vacation. But it's just a really joyful and peaceful week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, great. Well, we have time to hear from a couple others. I'm going to get back to our main screen and see if we can invite John and Sung-Shim Lop now. Many of you may know John and Sung-Shim from any number of places, but they're good friends of the Corsies, and my wife and I have had the joy of getting to know them as well. So want to welcome John and Sung-Shim. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hey, Nick, Christian, John, Charles, Dana. Good to see you guys. It's great to meet Dana and Charles. Yeah, we're learning a lot from you.
Oh yeah, I love it. I was crying.
I wish you could have heard her. She's very like embodied response, to your sharing.
Oh.
So she muted her tears and her crying, I take it. So we didn't hear that, but very touching. But you guys have been touched through Thrive. You guys God's used you to touch so many lives in so many ways, but it sounds like God has used Thrive to touch you and to bless you. So why don't you share with us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to, and how Thrive has impacted your lives?
Sure. So we both live in Los Angeles, La Crescenta right now. Sung-Shim's from Korea, and I'm from Chicago years ago. And so here we are, and we've gone to Thrive Track 1 and 2. Both life-changing. And as I was thinking and hearing your stories and imagining how I could introduce, Dallas Willard says, when you read the Bible, just like maybe like a morning devotion, that's like taking a shower. But sometimes you need to like immerse yourself, where it's like taking a bath. And then I would even say we go to a Korean spa locally where we spend the whole day, and there's different things that you can do and engage in. So going to Thrive Track 1, 2, 3 is like going to a Korean spa. So that metaphor may not totally, you haven't experienced it, but it is worthwhile experiencing. So that's how I kind of frame it in my mind, which is we love going to Korean spa as a family. So that's a little taste of what it's like. But how has it been transformative? So, I've been going to church I didn't go when I was born, but for about 35 years. And when I think about like everything that church asks you to do, what kind of person am I becoming? And I had a sense of belonging, and it was good, but it wasn't, there's always more, like Jen kind of mentioned more, like, how can I really I'm here and Christ is here, and how can this Christ life in me be more embodied? And when we do the things that Jen and Chris and Jim and others have modeled for us in Thrive, actually we become more like Christ.
Wow.
That's been my experience with Thrive. And the simple things. And, I remember track 1, both in our marriage and personally, track 1, 2, it kind of comes together. We're like quieting down. And I tell parents, the number one thing that we've learned over the years is when I'm upset with the kids, I'd say, hey kids, I'm really upset. I'm taking a walk. I'll be back in 2 minutes. And so they've seen me model that 100 times, and it's saved so much heartache in our parenting and in our marriage. Now we do it explicitly, and now we've done it where we can do it just implicitly. We kind of know where each other are. And I forgot to mention that. So what I was, I've been a pastor for 16 years, and we had a big transition, and the church had to restructure and downsize. So I was laid off. In that transition, these skills have been hugely helpful and powerful. And even as a peacemaker, but kind of my personality on the Enneagram's a 9, and I have a tendency not to speak up and tell the truth. But during this transition, I've been able to stay relationally connected to people and tell the truth to a larger community, which is a big deal for me. I know some people can teeter on either one, but that's a big one for me.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was powerful. I mean, we can attest to that. And there was another story where Sung-Shim and I, last year we had 2 car accidents, and our car insurance went up 250%.
Ouch.
while I'm being laid off. That is really painful. And luckily, one's my fault, one's her fault, so it's spread out. It's not just one of ours. But we were able to, like, we felt it. We felt the anger and the loss and the sadness and the shame, and to connect and kind of feel the bumps and then even convey it to the kids. Like, we're living that. That was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we're modeling real life. Like, that's not easy to go through that. But we're still relationally connected to Jesus, to our kids, to one another. So those are some fruit. And even on a ministry level, the people we've met, like after, like Thrive Track 1 and 2, and yeah, just really powerful, meaningful moments. We've been invited to go places. Relationships have grown. So there's a lot of really powerful, just relational connections, even there. Just even, you have other people who just get it right away, so that you can kind of regroup and then go back and bring it to the people who are learning about it. So I feel like I shared enough, and I want to just give opportunity for Sungshin to share.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm crying a lot, like Charles and Pastor Dana. Like, I just feel like when I listen to their story, my soul was deeply moved to tear. And I would say, when you go to Thrive, that's what's happening. Sometimes, though, you are not fully aware during the actual 5-day events, but what I'm sensing through this just encountering Charles, I think I have seen him somewhere, but Pastor Dana, this is my first time. But their real transformed story really grabbed the depth of my soul. And I think that's what's happening during this time of 5 days. And you might not be aware, but once me and John come home, each day, slowly, that just, whatever that I learn over there, the experiences just go a little inch deeper and deeper and deeper. It's been 5 years. 5 years ago, first track. Last year, second track. Like John mentioned, probably in our marriage and life, we went through the most transitional, most big thing in our life. Yet we suffer well. We remain the same. I didn't turn out to this monster that I used to, like, always flip. One at church, that I'm just a lovely, beloved child of God. But when I'm fighting with John, I'm turning into this, like a T-Rex or just monster. And now the life through this curveball, the biggest one probably so far I received, yet, John and I are the same. Like, I'm something, John is John, and I love that about it. So if you consider wanting to go to Thrive, I would definitely encourage you to put money and time. And then you guys talk about only the 5 day. We have, when we went 5 years ago, Zechariah, Zoe was like young, like they were 12 and 10 right now. So I know that challenge. Those people who are not sure, I totally understand. But I would say the relationship is worth it. So one last story that I will share and then wrap up. In our graduate school, we both had marriage and family therapy. And then the teacher said, when the couples come in, you are not treating a husband, you are not treating a wife. Then we are thinking, what are we treating then? And then you are treating the relationship. I'm like, okay, that sounds really beautiful. At the same time, I had no idea how to treat relationship. What the heck is that? Like, it's unseen reality. It's like kingdom of God. It's not only after death, but that when you learn how to really relate, practicing this relationship skill, I would say that kingdom of God over there actually come down here, not only in your own soul, in your marriage, in your parenting, in your friendship. So if you are considering, I would definitely 100% saying it, worth it, worth it, worth it. You'll never regret. So that's my word.
That's so encouraging, guys. And I just want to point out, and I think it's true for everybody on the call, but you guys were already growing Christians before you ever even heard about Thrive, let alone attended. You guys were serious followers of Christ. You'd been in church, you read your Bibles, you prayed. Sungshin, you're a therapist. John, you're a therapist. It's also in a pastoral ministry. So you guys were, you guys were getting after it. And yet what I hear from you is that God has used Thrive training to really catalyze growth and maturity and relational health and joy
Yes.
in a way that you didn't discover it in other things. Not that God can't use a lot of things, but God has used Thrive to really catapult you guys forward in your walks with God. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. The things that we engage in actually effectively leads towards our character transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe one thing that when I grew up so poor in Korea, I always longed for heaven, the home, like the ultimate home. There's no tears, no cares, and no fears. And I love to have the home, but honestly, my family of origin, when I think of a home, that's not the feeling that I have. That's peace and joy. I wanted to have that on earth in my marriage with John and then my kids, but I couldn't have that. But I think after Thrive, I'm not saying it's the answer to all, but that made it so feasible and visible in our home. I want to come home. My children, we all know these 6 big emotions. We know how to return to joy. It's just, they know how to do it together. And I love the taste of home on earth. And then I hope that other people, not only longing for home after death, I hope that they can get to taste this sweetness that our family, Pastor Dana and Charles, everybody is talking about. I want everybody to have it.
Wow. Well, that is so encouraging, guys. And I'm looking at the time and I'm realizing, wow, we're getting close to the end of the hour, but we do have time for a few comments or a few questions. Maybe you heard some things this morning, you just wanted to underscore it and say, man, I loved it when John or Sungshim or Charles or whomever shared this. You can underscore that. I'll read some of those out in a moment. You'll see there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. If you move your cursor kind of under the middle, you'll see Q&A. You can click that. You can type a comment. That's also a place you can type a question. And we're going to give Chris and Jen a few moments to answer a few of the questions live here on the webinar. If you have a question and we don't have time to answer it on the webinar, then we'll do our best to try to send you an email follow-up just to make sure that any questions you have about Thrive training or about anything you've heard today, we'll give a chance to get that information to you. And while you're taking a few moments to just jot down a comment or a question, I want to pull up on the screen again a slide with the link where you can find out more information and where you can register if God is tugging on your heart to make the investment, make the time to, make the time to join Thrive. Okay, my slide thing isn't working the way I wanted. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, there we go. That should do it. No, it didn't do it. Well, luckily, our web address is pretty easy, and it is thrivetoday.org/thrive. So I'll type that in the question and comment window and in the chat window, thrivetoday.org/thrive. And if you go there, you'll see the dates, you'll see the times, you'll see information about the tracks, lodging, registration, all that good stuff. So thrivetoday.org/thrive. So let's see. We have one question that's come in, Chris, and let's make sure that this is open. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's try that. Okay, Chris, the question is, a person is asking if they could hear you guys talk a little bit more about the actual 19 skills. What are those skills? What does that mean? And just give us a little bit more background so people know what exactly they'd be experiencing and learning about. I think you're muted, Chris. So.
Good question. Chris is getting unmuted there. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so good question. The 19 skills. So this was something when we first started, we actually didn't have any of the skills numbered. We just took all this great theory and research and started to kind of put the clay on the table, and we really weren't sure how to work it. But as we started to work with the material, it was actually several years later when we started to identify what are these skills we're precisely training, and then Jen counted how many minutes we were training on each skill in each track. So there's skills we need to build emotional capacity, like joy and rest and appreciation and bonded relationships with other people And what some of those skills do is it really gives us strength to start to master some of the harder skills. So we learn some of the DNA that God's placed in us that helps us, that really reflects our heart and who God created us to be. But we also discover how our heart characteristics lead to some of our greatest pain. And for me, that's one of my the best skills, just seeing how, wow, God made me to be this kind of a person that reflects his heart. But when people don't recognize some of those qualities, it's a source of angst and anguish and hurt. Then some of those other skills we have to learn is, how do I recognize when people are overwhelmed and they need a breather, right? How do I learn to keep relationships bigger than problems and regulate emotions as we interact? How do I learn to stay myself when big emotions fly? How do I learn to get back to joy when I'm stuck in a negative emotion? And we learn to recognize maturity. Where's my maturity? What are some next steps? And how do I learn to help other people recognize their maturity and some of their next steps? And we learn these, some of these harder skills. And as a track 3 trainer now, I really focus the week on helping people learn solutions for pain. In other words, your brain gets stuck at different levels of processing. And when you get stuck at a specific level, it shows up as a certain kind of pain. And so in track 3, we're learning to recognize, oh, I see Jen is stuck at level 3 here. She needs some attunement. She needs help getting back to joy because she's stuck here in some hopeless despair or what have you. So for each track, we're really focusing on some of these specific skills that we need to prepare for some of the harder skills. And I see that our friend Amy Brown is here. And so Amy Brown is a true identity trainer. So when everyone comes to True Identity this February or this July, Amy's going to help them kind of get the omelet version of the skills where all these fun ingredients are going to be put together for True Identity. And Jen, I know you usually have something you want to add on. Would you like to?
Sure. So the interesting thing about the skills, like Chris said, is there are growth skills, there are recovery skills, there are more advanced skills, which is combination, and a lot of the skills build on each other. So we lay out for you each day and each week what you're covering in each exercise. And track 1 is introduced to a large number of them, especially the growth skills. And then track 2 builds on that into the recovery skills, and track 3 builds even more onto that in the advanced skills. And the interesting thing, I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, but one of the ways that we design Thrive is for you not only to be trained to learn these skills for yourself, but to learn how to pass them on to others. So that's one of the things that we start doing in track 2 even, is start passing the skills on. Track 2 starts training track 1. And then by the time you get to track 3, you're also training track 1 and 2 with certain exercises so that you're learning how to pass them on, not just learning them for yourself. And I'll also say that on the thrivetoday.org website, one of the top banner options is relational skills, and it has in depth what all 19 are and the details about them.
Wow, really good stuff. Well, we've had a few more questions come in. I'd like to see what you guys would say. One question is from Eric. He says, how many hours, he says, about how many hours is the pre-work? If we are thinking about going to the Thrive conference in February, would we have sufficient time to work through the online course before the February date?
Yeah, good question. So some people fly through the courses in just a couple hours. Like I think there's 6 hours, give or take, of video where Dr. Wilder is teaching some of the theory behind it. But when you actually do the course, there's basically just discussion questions. And some people love to dig into those questions and interact with other people's answers and just take their time with that cup of coffee, and other people just want to drink it down and get it done. So I would say if you're trying to do the math on whether or not you have the preparation, the courses don't have to take very long. The videos will take probably 6-ish hours. There's a couple books that I don't think are too thick to read. So if you allotted a little bit of time each week to get through that stuff, I think it would be manageable.
Okay.
Yeah, And that's one reason actually that we have our final registration deadline for tracks 1 through 3 coming up this week on Thursday, is because we want to give you time to prepare before you come. So we don't want to let you register 1 week before and then not have time to complete it. Whereas the True Identity registration stays open for another couple weeks because there's no preparation required.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's a great point. I did want to make sure that we said that. So thanks for mentioning that, Jen, that for True Identity, you have a little bit more time. It's a couple more weeks to final registration deadline. But for track 1, 2, or 3, our February Thrive training, the deadline is this Thursday, the 17th. And so some of you might just be hearing about this today. I don't know, that's a quick turnaround. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe so, but I would really encourage you to pray about this and just say, Lord, my heart is stirred. I think this would really help me or help me and my spouse. God, do you want us to go? We really want to go. And I've been in a place like that before. Matter of fact, in True Identity, I heard about True Identity in January of 2017, and I did a quick turnaround and I was there in February. So that may be some of your story as well. So we'd love to see you in Tampa in February if you're able to make it. Another person asked, let's see here. They said, my husband and I have done the marriage weekend, because Chris and Jen also do some joyful marriage retreats. They said, should we start with True Identity or should we start with track 1 because we don't have a very strong relationship?
Great question. If you've already done the marriage weekend, which is kind of a little taster of Thrive, ultimately this comes down to if you're able to sit across from your hubby or your wife and really still feel some joy and appreciation, I would say track 1 would be the rewarding track as a next step. But if things are just kind of rough, awkward, there's not a lot of glad to be togetherness going on, then the True Identity would definitely be the slope. But most couples, if they feel like, things aren't where that we want them to be, but we still can enjoy each other, you're going to get a lot more out of the track 1 just because it's a little more intense.
And it builds your bond. I mean, the track 1 is built to build your bond and strengthen the bond with the person that you're doing the exercises with. So if there's not pain in that bond, that's kind of what Chris is saying. If it's not painful to you to look at your husband, for instance, then track 1 would probably be a good place to really work on that bond. But if there's pain, even just looking at your husband, that's where the True Identity, you could each work on your own skills without having to work on them in a bond that's painful, and then you'd have that to bring back to your marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing I love about True Identity is Amy does a good job of really building this group bond with the track. And by the end of it, it's like you think this is a family reunion. They're all just so glad to be each other, and they're in tears because they don't want to leave. And it's just, that can really help them marriage if there's pain in that bond. Just being part of a bigger group could be really rewarding.
That's, wow, so great. Well, we did have a few other questions come in that we sadly don't have time to answer right now. We will try to email you a response if we can today or tomorrow. And if you have any other questions about Thrive Today, especially if you're thinking about this February event and you're just not sure if you can make it work or have anything that we can help you with, go ahead and email jen@thrivetoday.org, and we'll make sure that you get a response to any questions you have, because as you can hear, the hearts of Chris and Jen and of Thrive Today is really to equip you with the relational skills that make life joyful and peaceful and abundant, like Jesus said really is our birthright as Christians. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we sign off, we didn't have time to hear from our good friend Amy Brown or John Saunders, but I want to give at least John, and if we have time, maybe Amy as well, just a 30-second little encouragement for anybody who's thinking, I don't know, should I go? I'm kind of on the bubble. John, what would you say to somebody who's considering going but not quite sure?
So what I'd say is each time I've gone to Thrive, God has met me there with something special. So if he's working on your heart to be there, I would encourage you to go. That time of focus and immersion just is what allowed me to open up to some really deep things. And when you get a big group of people that are all seeking to know God better and draw closer to him and to love one another, the way the Bible says we should, special things happen.
John, thank you. John and his wife Mary Ellen are Thrive raving fans, been through all the tracks, and now they assist, and they like Charles. They show up. Like, you're doing Thrive, we're going to be there. So thanks so much, John. And Amy, we're at 10 o'clock, so we're wrapping up here. But is there anything you want to say just as an encouragement to anybody considering coming? Well, unmute you here. I'll do that. There you go. You're
Yeah,
good.
I would just say it's a wonderful chance to see what the body of Christ can be. And sometimes we aren't sure exactly what that could look like. And so it's a wonderful experience to carry in your heart throughout the rest of the week as you interact with people.
Yeah, that's true. My wife and I loved the fact that the body of Christ, the whole capital C church, was represented with so many different denominations and tribes and groups, and yet the love and the joy and peace that Jesus talked about as normal for Christians really was present that week. So it's a great chance to be with God's people in God's presence and learning these skills that make life work and thrive. So thank you guys so much for joining us today for this webinar. If you would like to watch this again, or you want to share this with a friend who wasn't able to join us, you should receive a link in about 24 hours, at least by tomorrow afternoon. Check your inbox. You should see a link. And if you would love to share this, feel free. Make sure that people know about these upcoming trainings in February and July, and reach out to us if there's any way we can help you as you're praying about or processing if this is something God has for you this year. So on behalf of myself, on behalf of Chris and Jen Corsi and the team here at Thrive Today, thank you for joining us. God bless you, and may God continue to grow your capacity for joy and peace, that you might live that abundant life and with these relational skills that honor Him and that make life work the way He designed. God bless you, and we'll hopefully see you again on a webinar or maybe at a Thrive training soon. Take care. Bye, guys. Thanks to everybody. John and Sangshim, Amy, Charles, John, Dana. God bless you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank